And we're still on chapter 1. And some of you said, oh my goodness, can he not get past that? No. All right. Yeah. Verse 9, chapter 1. We are teaching this particular series on breaking out of darkness. And we still haven't got to that the title of the message yet. But in verse 9 it says this, and we're going to read this one in verse 10. For this reason we also, since the day we heard it, do not cease to pray for you and to ask that you may be filled. Notice this is what we're going to deal with today. The knowledge of His will. The knowledge of His will. That in all wisdom and spiritual understanding that you may walk worthy of the Lord, fully pleasing Him, being fruitful in every good work, and increasing in the knowledge of God. So to fully please Him, it tells us what has to happen. That's the last part of verse 10. You're fruitful in every good work, and you're increasing in the knowledge of the Lord. So we've been dealing with this subject, like I said, for weeks now. And hopefully getting to this place where we really deal with this, that we are to be walking in the light. And I thought of that this morning, and we'll touch briefly. The beginning, heavens and the earth was without form and void, and what filled the earth? Darkness covered the face of the earth. And Jesus came and He said, I am the light of the world. He that follows me will not what? Walk in darkness, but they will walk in light. And you and I today, we've been set free, we've been saved, we have been brought from darkness into the light. And so how do we continue to grow? How do we continue to progress? How do we continue to not only walk in the light, but also be a light bearer? And we must, I was part of a group years and years ago, and one of the missions was called Send the Light. And it was about sending help to missionaries that they might bring light into dark places. And so we've spent millions upon millions of dollars sending people and finances to other countries around the world, haven't we? That we might be able to help those places bring light into darkness. But we are living in a time when there's darkness, and the word that Jesus used and the prophets used, gross darkness, over the face of the earth. So although there has been light, there's a cloud, there's a covering that is blocking the light and bringing darkness into the lives of many of us, and we are children of the light. Does that make sense to you? So we're living in a time when, although we've been exposed to light, many, Jesus would say, have been exposed to the light, but what did they do? They chose darkness over the light. So, how do we get to that point? And I believe that is found in verse 9. When Paul, as he was writing to the church, said that we ask that you may be filled with the knowledge of His will. Folks, knowledge brings enlightenment. We were singing today, and as we were singing, I was thinking about what the word said in the song, Lord, don't let my vision die. And there's a gentleman, he and his wife walk in my park, and I was talking to him this week, and he's diabetic, and he said, I have really good days when I can see, but he said, today I can see your face, but it's kind of a blur. He said, even looking, holding my hand out and looking, he said, my vision is so clouded today that I can't really make out the specifics of my own hand. When your vision dies, it's because there has been a darkness that has overtaken you, and it's brought darkness instead of light into your life. So how do we overcome that? How do we get past that? At one point, I'm going to ask you personally, what is the darkness that tries to overcome you and overshadow you? Now think about that. Jesus said, if you walk in my will, you will know me, and you will know what I desire. And so when you're talking about the will of God, how do we have the knowledge of what that will is? What is it that gives us that understanding? It's light. And light comes from the very presence of the Lord. And verse 9 says that we might know the will of God. And how we know that is we are filled with the knowledge of His will. What does that mean? Knowledge is to pervade all of our being. Knowledge. It's to prevail over the thoughts, and it's kind of like we have this filter. Brenda has this little vacuum, and it's for just getting into tiny spots in her case to make sure there's not parts of icing or pieces of her cake. And it gets in there and it vacuums that out because it's got a small opening. There are times when it's not doing so well. So what do I have to do? I have to take it apart, and I have to clean that filter. And it's amazing because as soon as I clean that filter, I can go back to the place or the spot where I was not able to get any of the crumbs, and I can turn that vacuum on, and because its filter is clean, it'll take and absorb that and suck that up. Folks, sometimes our filters get clogged up. Sometimes that which is able to separate light and darkness and good from evil and the holy from the unholy and the right from the wrong gets clouded. And it gets a little bit clogged up, and we really can't distinguish. Have you ever had anything that was going on and you thought, is this right or wrong? Let's bring that down to where we live. You see, as churches and pastors, sometimes we talk up here and people are grasping to follow. Let's get it right down where we live. Is your filter clogged? Is there things that's going on in your life? Maybe it's not you doing it, but it's in your life, and it's clogging up your filter, and you can't distinguish what is right and what is wrong. You can't tell, Lord, is this of you? And we'll get to it a little bit later, but Eve was in the garden, walking around, noticing everything that was so beautiful and so, wonderful. And here comes this thing called the serpent. And said, man, have you looked at all these trees in this garden? Aren't they amazing? And I'm sure Eve said, oh, yes, they are. And Brenda's told me today that we were coming in and I was doing something really silly. And she said, don't you do that in church. And the serpent says, hey. She said, no, I can't do that. She said not to do that. Have you looked at this tree? And Eve says, yes, it's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. He said, yeah, isn't it pretty? Now, and I thought about this. We want to blame the serpent. And yeah, he is to blame because he was cursed. But was he the only one cursed? And we want to blame him because he's obviously a good target. There are some of you that are good targets. You're easy targets. You do things that make it easy for people to target you. Oh, yeah, now we're talking, aren't we? I'm talking about this filter system. And Eve was listening, and the serpent said, hey, Kenny, hey, Eve, did you know? Well, that's the fruit on that tree. Look how pretty. The lust of the what? Eye, the lust of the flesh, and the pride of life. That's a really nice fruit there on that tree. Have you ever thought about how good that would be? And not only would it taste good, but here's what else it's going to give you the knowledge of good and evil. You're going to be like God. Her filter system was failing. Now, did it just fail there? I don't, and you say, well, Pastor, it doesn't say in the Bible that it just one day. I wonder if she'd been going to that tree maybe before that. Oh, are you staying with me? Because we're going somewhere. We're on a trip here. I'm going to take a trip. And so maybe she was going to looking at this tree even before the serpent showed up, and he just had been watching her. And he said, this is the place that her filter system is not too strong. Sometimes, I'm going to preach now, sometimes the enemy watches. The Bible says he's as a roaring lion. He's walking through the earth about looking for someone who's let their filter get a little bit clogged. Are you still out there? And he may not come to you in the beginning, but he's watching, and he was watching her, and she kept going back. I don't know. I can't prove this, but I'm saying usually your mistakes don't just happen. Sometimes they're things that build up. Oh, remember, I got to clean that filter in her little vacuum about every day. Why? Because after I vacuum out these, it's where the doors open and close. And I vacuum those out. Then I'm going to vacuum around the perimeter of her rugs and vacuum anything I can't sweep. So I've used that vacuum enough that that filter's getting dirty. That filter has to be cleaned. How often? Every day. Every day. Folks, your filter, that thing in your life that protects you and keeps you, needs to be serviced every day. 7 days without prayer makes one. If we don't stay in touch, in prayer, what Paul said, I pray for you that you may be filled with the knowledge of His will. So we have to stay in touch and in tune with the Lord. You cannot have a strong relationship with the Lord when your only contact with Him is Sunday mornings.